Hello, everyone. I'm Kirsten Friend. I'm from Bayside City Council. Hopefully, a few people are joining soon. I wanted to just welcome everyone and thank Renew for hosting these webinars. These types of webinars are facilitated by Renew, a national not-for-profit organisation that inspires, enables and advocates for people to live sustainably in their homes and communities. And they curate experts to help spread this message. And tonight's webinar outlines how you can create a climate-ready and water-wise garden and integrate sustainable water systems into your design. And I'll introduce our expert, Mike, in a minute. Firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners and custodians of this land. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, as well as any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander community members with us tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where our facilitators are tuning in from. We recognise and respect their continuing connection to country and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So I'd like to introduce Michael Hughes, or Mike, from Let's Grow Shopping. Mike discovered permaculture over 10 years ago after being inspired to leave the mining industry, slow down and tread lighter. He renovated his house as an owner builder, became vegan, completed a permaculture design certificate and started Let's Grow Shopping, whose goal is to help others become the change they wish to see in the world. Mike opens his demonstration garden during the Sydney Edible Garden Trail, and his home has been featured during Sustainable House Day. He has also appeared on Gardening Australia. So relax and sit back, hopefully you got a cup of tea, and enjoy your learning experience for the next 90 minutes. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Kirsten. Yes, I'll just share my screen and post some slides. Okay, yes, welcome to the water and greening presentation for Renew. I'll just click onto the first slide. So before I get into the nitty-gritty of this, there's a fantastic resource online, Your Home. It's a government resource, and it explains the basics behind a sustainable home and covers much of the same content we're going to discuss tonight. There's a lot of information in this presentation, so Your Home is a great sort of backup to what's being discussed. The last slide contains a list of resources, which includes this Your Home link, to help you dive into certain topics. So tonight we're going to cover water-sensitive urban design. Your house, managing water and greening around your house, around your garden, and then we'll talk a little bit about fire-wise gardening. So first up, we'll talk about water-sensitive urban design and what it is. And so this is all about just becoming more sensitive to the natural water cycle in urban environments. Without water, nothing lives, including us. And as we've seen lately with, especially in New South Wales, where I'm based, with the floods, water can destroy it as easily as it creates life. So we can't underestimate it. We have a responsibility not to underestimate that. Our urban designs are having a really negative impact on the landscape, and water-sensitive urban design is a step in the right direction to try and remedy that. So if you look at this, this slide, water-sensitive urban design aims to reduce pollution in the waterways, it reduces the flood risk, and it increases this cooling effect of transpiration and replenishing natural groundwater. The left-hand side of that picture shows a forested environment, and an extreme example, obviously the Amazon rainforest. Up to 85% of water is evaporated or transpired back into the atmosphere, creating a cooling effect and creating more rain in a forested environment. And you probably heard like the Amazon rainforest has pretty much got its own weather system because it's doing that in such a great way. So only about 15% in the forest of the rain infiltrates down through all those layers of the forest into the ground and into the water table. Once it's in the water table, it takes, anywhere between hundreds and thousands of years to gradually percolate through the rocks back to the river, where it gradually flows away into the sea. You contrast that with the other side of the picture on urban property, or urban landscapes, sorry. Only about 15% of the water evaporates back into the atmosphere once it's fallen. So there's not much cooling effect and no increase in precipitation. So it's pretty much the opposite effect of the forested environment. About 85% of the water in an urban environment hits the hard surfaces and is directed as quickly as humanly possible into the stormwater system and runs off into the rivers. So there's nothing really left for the water table, and all this water hitting the river system all at once, in a short space of time, creates huge flood risks. The main principle behind water-sensitive urban design is slowing the water down, which allows it to soak into the landscape and sink in. And a great analogy for that is the champagne tower at a wedding or a special event. What you're trying to do is really make the water work harder as it goes through your landscape. So it might hit your landscape from rain from above, or via a sort of a water course that's coming maybe from upstream, up the slope from your property and then leaving your property down the bottom end. I've got both on my property. It's like just an urban property. And so, yeah, gravity is your friend. You're trying to use gravity to make the water work harder as it passes through your landscape. It's very, very property specific, and each property has got its own unique challenges to making this work. So whilst you can get ideas from loads of people, which really is the key to doing this, you go around open garden events such as Sustainable House Day or Edible Garden Trails, chatting to people who've had a go at this before, and you work out the strategies that you can use on your own property to make the water work harder. So the forest is basically catching that water all the way down the champagne tower. If the bottle is the rain or the river coming into your landscape, you're pouring it into the first glass. You're trying to hold as much as possible, but once that overflows, there's somewhere else for it to go, and you're still catching it. You're still using it somewhere else, and onwards down to the bottom tier of glasses. The current urban landscapes are the equivalent of really moving all those glasses to one side and pouring the champagne directly on the table and having it flood everywhere. So yeah, we're trying to get this champagne tower effect to help us out a bit. This is something I've done at my own place. So this is my backyard. And I just wanted to give you an illustration of this champagne tower effect. So the rain falls on my garage roof and comes down these downpipes into the tank on the side, stainless steel tank. When the tank's full up, it obviously got to overflow somewhere. So the overflow comes out the front, down that diagonal pipe, hits the wall, goes straight down into the pavers, underneath the pavers, and there's a garden bed on the left here. It pops up again out of the pavers and into this pipe. This pipe is on the dead level all the way down that garden bed, which is about 10 meters long. I used a laser level to drill holes all the way down the length of that pipe on an absolute level. So when the water gets in there, it fills up that pipe all at the same time, and the leaks out of all the holes at once. So the whole length of the garden bed gets watered. It's a brick sort of bed, and it doesn't just fill up like a bath. I've put a hole down the bottom here, there's a slotted ag pipe in the bottom of the garden bed that allows the excess water to run out of this hole in the wall about where the laser pointer is now. The water runs through the wood chip on the path, like it's just literally just wood chip, so it's very porous. The water can freely pass through that. You'll see this pond in a later photo of its original state, but I've bricked in around a natural water sort of sink and put another pipe through this brick wall. So the water flows through the path, through the pipe, into the pond, fills the pond up. The pond fills up and then overflows into this garden bed, watering the plants. The water seeps through that garden bed and passes off downhill to the right-hand side, down to my banana patch, which can take as much water as I want to throw at it. So you can see the champagne tower effect. Each of those tiers is one of the glass levels, and I'm trying to stop the water leaving my property and making it work for me as it goes through. So we'll go on to the home. On a large scale, obviously your house could be subject to flooding depending on what happens in the area and how much rain you get. I'm in New South Wales, and following the Northern Rivers floods up near Lismore, the New South Wales Resilient Homes Programme released this detailed flood resilience guide for new and existing homes. And I'm not sure if this is repeated like state by state, but it's accessible from wherever you are. But it gives loads of tips on what you should do if you're worried about flood and you're going to build a house. There's little tricks and tips you can get about building walls and stuff that make it easier if it could ever flood, easier to clean up if it ever flooded. It's actually a real challenge to advise on this because nothing is a one-size-fits-all solution. And you might think that flood damage is only relevant if you live down there in the floodplain, but it's another thing I've seen a lot of is water flowing upslope from people's houses. And where I live, a lot of people tended to build rumpus rooms and granny flats underneath the main level of the house. The wall facing upslope is usually, bare rock on the other side of that. They've dug in under the house, bare rock, the house wall, and then the rumpus room. What was tending to happen is water falling upslope on the land, it percolates through the rocks, hits the wall of the rumpus room, and just passes straight through the wall into the rumpus room. So they're getting flooding downstairs. That was unbelievably common. And it's easy to mitigate, but you have to do it when you're building the property or building the rumpus room. It's really, really hard to retrofit without taking everything apart again. So if you're planning to dig out any bedrock to make new living space, you need a literally watertight plan to keep it dry in the heaviest downpour. A simple solution to keeping the water away from your house is just using big eaves to keep the ground immediately around the walls drier. And we'll talk later about using some landscaping techniques to reduce the impact of heavy surface rain. Another aspect of water saving in the home, and probably one of the main ones, is doing a water audit, finding out what really happens to your water. This is a huge eye-opener, really gives you a good insight into how you're using the water and, more importantly, how you can save it. So this gives you a clue about obviously where it's going and what you're using the water for, and it gives you a great idea of how much you need to harvest if you want to make your house sustainable off tanks. And particularly thinking about grey water and the garden, there are some habits that you can change that may be the largest water saving you can make. And we'll keep coming back to that as well during the presentation. Again, there are a couple of resources listed at the end of this slideshow, which will help you work out how much water you're currently using, and you can see where your savings can be made. The Australian Water Efficiency Labelling and Standards Scheme requires products such as shower heads, toilets, washing machines, dishwashers, taps and flow controllers to be rated and labelled for their water efficiency. So you've probably seen these labels when you go into a white goods store. They have them for energy and as well as water. And it just makes us, helps us really easily make an efficient choice for our budget on water or energy. One thing to be aware of, though, is with water consumption in particular, there are some appliances that use hot water, such as dishwashers. So they're using water and they're using energy. Whilst low water use is good, if that compromises the amount of electricity the appliance needs to use to be that efficient, then it might not balance out very well. You need to do the research and find out exactly what that appliance is about and whether it's going to have the required bang for its buck. So that web address there on the label, www.waterrating.gov.au, has all the, I think it's got most of the water efficient appliances on there, so you can compare them. A really, really simple way of reducing water wastage is just putting the hot water taps as close as possible to the hot water system. So having your external hot water system directly outside the laundry, the bathroom, and the kitchen. I'm sure everyone's got in the shower at this time of year. Turn the water on; it's about -2, and you wait for all the cold to come through before the hot, and then you jump in the shower. So if you've got the pipe, if there's less pipe for that cold water to go through, then there's less water wasted. Also saves on resources such as copper and getting it to the bathroom. And grey water. So this is there's a few types of water that come out of your house. Water from the toilet or washing nappies is considered black, and for the purposes of this discussion, it's out of bounds. You can treat it, but you need equipment and a long ongoing plan to deal with black water. Basically, feces will produce pathogens in the water, and you need to be dealing with that. So it's for the purposes of this discussion, it's a lot easier for that going down the sewage, and the water authority can deal with it. The kitchen sink is a mix of black and grey water. So whilst you're washing your hands in the kitchen sink, that's not so bad. But when you have cooked a roast and you've got the oil and the meat residues, you need oil traps or grease traps and all sorts of stuff to make the kitchen sink water come up to some kind of standard to put it in your garden. And again, it's not so bad once or twice, but over the period of 6 months, there's a lot of grease, a lot of oil, and yeah, you need serious equipment to make that work properly. Grey water, on the other hand, is not so bad. It's quite easy to manage, and that's just from your hand basin, the shower, and the laundry. So essentially detergent and the dirt from your hands or your clothes or your body. Grey water needs to be, and we're going to see it in a minute, but it needs to be free flowing to the garden. If you leave it to sit in a sort of tank or a tub for more than 24 hours, you're increasing greatly the chances of having pathogens in the water, and they'll carry diseases. So yes, you've got to keep it moving and get it into the soil as quickly as possible. And one other thing about grey water, it causes you to think more upstream of what you're doing. So when you've got this water directed into your garden, you start then thinking, okay, what am I washing my hands with? So you start going to the supermarket and reading the labels and finding out what's in your soap and making sure you're not putting microplastics in your garden beds. So these pictures show simply how you can divert the grey water out of your house. So there's a sink there with the U-tube underneath. The pipe goes into the main sewage pipe in the wall. And then halfway down, there's a diverter valve. So you can have it going down to the sewage, but when you're ready to put grey water on, you just hook the pipe up to that diverter valve, turn the switch, and then water from the sink is going out into the garden. Again, you want to keep it moving, so you don't want any tubs or tanks in the way, just the pipe going straight out into the garden beds if possible, and away from the house walls. You don't want water constantly dripping and leaking right next to the house, so you don't attract things like termites and stuff if you've got constantly wet soil right near the walls. The middle photo there shows a good example of how the pipe should be in the ground, pretty much buried ideally under the mulch. The quicker that water gets in contact with soil microbes, the quicker or the more likelihood there's going to be no problems with it, no diseases. The soil microbes take care of everything and essentially just compost it. Putting wood chip over the pipe is a great idea. Wood chip will break down more slowly than other kinds of mulch material, but provide great support for the pipe and where it's going. So you can choose to move it if you want in the future. So you can keep moving your grey water pipe, just keep it buried under the mulch all the time. Grey water is not for use on veggies. You don't want, well, essentially it's perfect for ornamentals and trees. Anything with my rule of thumb is a woody trunk filters out all the nasties in grey water, and it never gets into even fruit trees. It never gets into the fruit and the leaves. If you put it on your veggies, lettuce, for example, will just suck the water up and put it straight in the leaves, and that goes straight in your salad, and you'll be eating it. So yes, only for ornamental garden beds and trees in general, and native garden beds. Fantastic for that. The picture on the right-hand side shows, I'm sure we're all familiar with like the 13 mil quite thin black pipe that people use to irrigate with. Grey water has its own pipe, which is a purple pipe, and that just makes it completely obvious that pipe is for grey water and not for normal water going through the garden. Okay, gutters and rainwater harvesting. And essentially, when we're talking about rainwater harvesting, we're talking about tanks. The number one decision you need to make when you're thinking about tanks is, are you going to be using the tank water to supply the house, the garden, or both? Obviously, big differences in amounts. And any water that's destined for a tank needs to be as clean as you can make it. To maintain, I'm going to describe a few things that need to go into a tank system, and maintaining this system is a lot easier than cleaning out the inside of a tank. Cleaning out the inside of a tank is actually a really dangerous job. The decomposition of sludge in the bottom of the tank can actually create gases in there that displace the oxygen. So you can climb in the tank and pass out for lack of oxygen. So it's a pretty dangerous job. So maintaining this system is a lot easier than that. So tank water can be used for drinking water, flushing a toilet or the garden. You could even use it for the shower. There's not a lot of houses really in the urban environment that use it for the whole house. Most people use it for things like flushing the toilet or the laundry as well. I forgot to put that on there. The first thing you need to clean this water is some form of leaf diverter off the roof. So you don't want leaves collecting in the gutters and going down the downpipes into your tank. The diagram there shows that there's a couple of kinds of leaf diverting material, but there's this sheet metal, or you can get the U-shaped mesh that fits in the gutter. I prefer the U-shaped mesh for long-term maintenance. Trying to pull this stuff off when you want to get the sludge out the bottom of the gutter is really difficult. So the U-shaped mesh is easy to take in and take out, and put back in. And you could also get a specific leaf diverter, which I haven't got a picture of it actually, but you put it directly below the gutters in the down. You cut a hole in the downpipe and put it underneath the gutters. It's essentially just a sloped grill, and leaves fall on the sloped grill and just slide straight off, whereas the water will pass straight through the grill and go down the downpipes. Once you have it in the downpipe, it's heading towards the tank. So you've got your gutters at the top here. These pipes come from the gutters at the top and then into this vertical section. Now the vertical section is a first flush device. If you imagine you've had a dry period for like 6 months, there's loads of muck and grime just accumulates on your roof. And then it hammers down one day. The first bit of water that runs off your roof is going to wash all that muck into the gutters. It's small enough, to go through any leaf guards you have. And it comes straight down the pipes. The first bit of water is going to drop straight down this pipe to the bottom. And ideally this part here, up to this horizontal pipe, needs to be about 20 litres, ideally, which is roughly 1 metre to 1.5 metres of vertical pipe. So this first 20 litres or so falls down to the bottom with all the sludge and stays there. And then by the time the pipe is filled up with continuing rain, it overflows, by the time it's filled up to this overflow, it's clean water. And so you're going to lock clean water going down this pipe into your tank. At the bottom of the first flush device is a screw cap, so you can take the bottom off and clean it out. Some of them you can actually buy first flush devices off the shelf, and some of them essentially just leak. So there's a little nozzle on the bottom that drips permanently when there's water in there. that just empties this pipe of water and leaves the sludge in the bottom for you to clean out. The nature of this sludge, though, I've found, is that it's all the really, really fine stuff, which blocks any drippy nozzle that you have at the bottom. I've got a tap on the bottom of mine and occasionally it even blocks the tap up. So you need to unscrew this and the water will just gush out to unblock it and clean it out. You essentially clean that out after every big rain event. This one's really clever in the fact that the drip, and if you took the cap off for some reason, you didn't want it going in the tank for a while, it's going straight down into the stormwater pipe below. This is a good time to point out as well, what flows into a tank needs to flow out of a tank. When the tank is full, any volume of water coming in this pipe needs to come out of the same size pipe. So if you have two of these 90 ml water pipes going into your tank, ideally you need two 90 ml water pipes coming out as an overflow. You don't want the tank sort of filling up to bursting and popping out and water gushing out of the top of the tank. You want it all to come out of an overflow so that you can control it and send it to where it needs to go. I'd imagine this one is connected back to this stormwater pipe underneath, so it's going straight into the stormwater system. A lot of people who just put a tank in themselves leave this blank and have water just pouring out of the overflow freely onto the ground or onto a wall at the house wall. You really, really need to avoid doing that. Any water that's gushing out onto the floor it'll erode all the soil and gravel. Even if your tank is on a slab, it could undermine the corner of the slab. So you really need to be controlling the outflow of water and sending it somewhere far away from the house where it's not going to do any harm. On top of, if you've never had tanks, you might not know what's on top of the tank, and the water goes into a basket. The basket is just basically a sieve to stop, as a last resort, to stop bulky material going into the tank. Stops things like rats and frogs getting into your tank and drowning and really poisoning the water. Mine at home get clogged up with all sorts of the really fine stuff like little eucalypt seed pods and stuff. It's a great idea to keep access to this at the ends of your inlet pipes and this basket with a ladder access, so you can get up there and scoop this stuff out once in a while. Tanks come in all shapes and sizes these days. You don't have to just have a big round one. The one, I'll just grab the pointer again. This tank is down the side of my house, only about 750 mil wide, so there's enough room for the tank and the path down the side of the house. You can see there I've got water coming off the roof down into a first flush, overflows into the tank, and then my overflow goes back into the stormwater system underneath the house, and that's a pretty typical tank setup. I've got the tank on a concrete slab. The tank really needs to be really well supported. It's not really good enough just to put it on blank ground. I put a slab underneath each of my tanks and then around the edges bricks. So I don't really want to surround it with loose earth either. The one in the middle, these tanks are underneath the house. So you really need to control that outflow. You want the outflow to go far away from the house. If the overflow just poured on the floor, you're actually eroding the ground underneath your house that the supports will be, depending on. The two examples on the right here are great for renters or in a temporary situation. You can get food grade olive barrels and just put them on a small roof. This one's on my chicken coop, so the water falls into the olive barrel and I can use that water for the chickens' water. I don't have to wander all the way to the house to fill up the chickens' water. They've got their own tank right next door to their coop. And then the one at the bottom here is these IBCs, which are intermediate bulk containers. You can get food grade ones. So there are industrial sort of, what's they got in them, lubricants and grease and stuff that mechanics use. You do not want to get those. You want the food grade ones that have had things like fruit cordial in them. You can easily clean them out and use them for fresh water. This example shows that they've connected two of them. So there's 2,000 litres there, all connected to each other. So you can, have that to go on the garden. These are really simple and not that two people can easily lift one, not full of water, obviously, when it's empty, and chuck it in the back of a ute. They're easy to transport about. And then this final example is a bladder. If you've got if the only space you can fit a tank is underneath the small crawl space under the house, you can get bladders that go under there. Obviously you can squeeze the bladder in a small hole and then it expands out when it's full of water. In most cases, you would need a pump to be able to use this water to get it out of that gap under your house. I'm not a huge fan of having a couple of thousand litres in a very easily damageable bag underneath my house, but if that's the only space you've got, there's at least an option for that. So how big does your tank need to be? Renew have a great tool on their website called the Tankulator, which helps you work it out. And basically, you're just calculating the volume that you can collect off your roof, and then from your water audit, how much you use. And you can see how much water you will need to last over a certain drought period. And you can get that information from the Bureau of Meteorology. My drought period, I calculated at I think it was about 6 months. My water audit showed I would need I think it was 45,000 litres to last me 6 months. Now I don't have space around my house for 45,000 litres of water. I chose 4 tanks that were as big as I could get where I could fit them, and they ended up being 27,000 litres. So my tanks only feed the garden, so I'd need a lot more if I was going to feed the house as well. Most commercial tank manufacturers have some kind of a calculator on their website, and some of them are great, but some are a bit too simplistic, so it's worth having a play with a couple. Your required volume doesn't have to all be in one tank. It's actually quite beneficial to have more than one tank for a bit of insurance. If one leaks or needs a repair, then at least you've got some water somewhere. And if you've got a prominent tank, the only place you can put it is sort of in full view of everyone. You can disguise it with trellises and grow a passion fruit vine up it, or do a bit of clever landscaping and sort of hide it behind the trees. The one point about that is you need to be able to access that basket in the top of the tank for maintenance purposes. So don't drown it in plants and landscape and stuff. It's not really that recommended either to lean a ladder up against the tank. You really need to be able to have a freestanding ladder or lean it up against the fence or the house or something to be able to get in there. And so we'll move to the garden. The number one solution for low maintenance, time poor gardeners that want to save water is native plants. You cannot beat an Australian native garden for saving as much water as possible. You can go to, your council should have a list of, or hopefully has a list of suitable plants. I know my council does. You can go in the bush. I regularly go bushwalking in the local bush, take photos of plants and work out what they are. And I know it grows in my local area. This photo shows a really, it's very subtle, but shows a great example of using the forest layers. So you've got tall trees, head-high shrubs, waist-high herbs, and then ground covers. And this, filling every niche of the forest in all these layers, gives you this really great cooling forest effect around the house. So you're providing a really a great environment around the house. It's not baking hot all the time. The dappled shade from these tall trees is great for a native garden. It's a common misnomer is, you go to the nursery and see the plant label and it said it needs to be in full sun. I haven't grown a plant yet that loves the full Australian direct summer sun day after day. And so this filtered light through the eucalypt trees is absolutely fantastic for most plants. Another great, another tool you're going to need, especially if you're doing a new build on a blank slate, is the contours of your land to find out exactly where water flows on your property. So the contours essentially are lines that are horizontal. Now, if you just had, say, a hardcover book and you tipped it up and that's a flat slope, that's easy to work out where the contours are. They're directly perpendicular to the slope of that book. They go straight across the book. Unfortunately, the landscape is nothing like the book, and it's got undulations and stream beds in it, and so all these contours are quite bendy. It's quite easily possible to find them out. You just need to do a bit of research, and it's quite a fun job. This is the part I actually enjoy. If you're doing your landscaping so it follows the contours, it's got this really natural looking landscape to it rather than straight lines and angles. People come to my place and see what I've done, and it sort of flows nicely, and it's because I'm using the contours. I've not just put the garden beds perpendicular to the curbside or the house. They're going where the landscape is telling me to put them so that I can use the water efficiently. So if you look at that photo below, the slope runs from right to left, and the garden beds are on the contour, so they're going in and out of the camera in that plane. The water lands on the grass at the top right there, flows perpendicular to the contour, straight down the hill, follow the easiest route with gravity. It hits the first garden bed, and if that garden bed's perfectly on contour, it's got a decision to make, left or right. And if it is perfectly on contour, it's going to go both ways. When it hits the garden bed, it's actually slowing down, so it's soaking into the landscape. So it's hitting a garden bed that's full of nice, beautiful, porous soil, and so it soaks into that garden bed a lot more. A really heavy flow obviously the water will start to back up at the garden bed, start heading left and right and around the garden bed. But if it'll come round the side of the garden bed and flow down the hill again, the fastest route, and hit this garden bed. And so again, you're getting this champagne tower effect of the water being held up by various obstacles, and it's having to work to get down to the bottom of the slope. And so you can just engineer the landscape so that it catches the water wherever it's going. And it keeps all your garden beds nice and healthy and damp, your soil healthy, you don't have to water it as often, and the plants are thriving, providing this cooling effect around the house. To make great soil in the first place, you don't need to, but a great idea to make great soil is a no-dig garden bed, and that's what these photos are showing. Most soil either starts out as really clay-rich. It doesn't let the water soak in very easily. It runs across the top. And when it really does rain, it takes ages and ages to dry out. It gets waterlogged. Or you can have the opposite of that, which I have at my house, which is sandy soil, drains really efficiently. The water passes straight through it. 2 days after a major downpour, there's no water left in it. I have to water it again. The solution to both of these problems is organic matter, and it makes your soil more like a sponge. And so organic matter is anything organic. So that could be plants, hay, wood chip, anything that's been living once is organic matter. Your own compost. If you think of a really old, damp piece of wood that's rotting, you can squeeze it and the water sort of oozes out of it. If you imagine millions of pieces of that all the way through your soil, that is essentially holding the water in your soil. So in sandy soil, that's fantastic. It keeps hold of the water for longer. I don't have to water it so much. In clay soil, the organic matter particles break up the clay and link together so that water can now drain out of your soil rather than be held in the clay permanently. So great soil actually needs about 25% air in it, and solid clay's got next to no air in it. Sandy soil's got heaps of air in it, like too much air. And so the organic matter helps the air gaps form, and worms and soil life can move through your soil and make it as good as it can be. No-dig garden beds are essentially just adding heaps and heaps of organic matter to an existing landscape. This is my front yard. I spent 7 years renovating the house, and the lawn there at the front had skips on it, for years at a time, and loads of rubbish. So the soil was compacted, hard, and really terrible. And so I just cardboarded the whole thing, put bricks where I wanted the path edges to be, filled up the paths with wood chip, and then put anything I could find on the garden beds, organic matter wise, to build up a lasagna style no-dig garden bed. The no-dig garden bed doesn't just stop there though. Year upon year, you want to mulch heavily after that. So there's no better way of saving water in your garden than mulch. And again, it's adding this organic matter to your soil. It's literally feeding your garden. If you mulch 10 to 15 centimeters thick about once a year, you're doing your garden a massive favor. And year on year, you want to try and mix up the mulch material. So one year you might use decomposed wood chip. The next year you might use well-rotted horse manure. The year after that, mushroom compost. You can use anything that isn't a noxious weed as mulch. So if you have loads of plants growing and you need to prune them back, chop those prunings into small pieces, like 5 centimeter pieces, and just leave them under the trees. That's a layer of mulch. You can also grow your own living mulch as dense ground covers. So plants that do that really well are strawberries, pumpkins, native violets. If you put your hand into native violets, even on a hot day, the soil will be nice and moist in the bottom of there. They're about probably 200 mil thick, and they grow really densely. And so they're fantastic for keeping the soil life there and your garden thriving. And you don't need to water as much. Another aspect of a water-wise garden, but it's more in terms of the wildlife and creating a healthy habitat around the house, is a pond. It really exponentially increases the biodiversity. And this is an example of me making use of what I already had in the landscape rather than doing something drastic. We had a huge sandstone outcrop where there was nothing. So like this part of the garden was just baking hot in summer. Like the rock heated up and reflected the sun off of it. So when you stood on there in the middle of summer, it was just red hot. And I was trying to think of ways to, mitigate this and grow things. And that's a low point in the rock in the middle there. When it rained, that filled up with water naturally. Frogs had laid frog spawn in there, tadpoles. They would have to grow up really fast before the pond evaporated, and there was no water left. And so I just bricked in around it and filled it with water, and now it's nearly permanently full. It does get low, and I fill it up from my tanks from time to time, but it's nearly a permanent water source these days. Another really great addition to a garden is, and this goes towards grey water and your habits in the garden, is an outdoor sink or shower. This sink sits now right next to my veggie patch. Where that grass is in the foreground is now a veggie patch. So I'm growing things, turn round, washing them, and then sending them into the kitchen. And so the water comes out the bottom of the sink into this pipe, and again, a level spreader with horizontal holes in it that waters the whole of this garden bed. And so you can make, just really easy, simple ways of distributing water around that are avoiding the stormwater system and feeding your plants. You can erect things around your house, like man-made structures that help the cooling effect. It alters the temperature inside of your house as well as outside of your house. And if you use eaves, the awning, or fences, trellises and pergolas, you can put things like this photo shows a grapevine growing up the pergola. You can see that in summer, which is when this photo is taken, the grapevine is full of leaves and shading the living area quite nicely. The sun is overhead. But in winter, the sun is a lot lower in the sky. The grapevine loses all its leaves because it's a deciduous plant, and the sunlight can, in the low angle, can go straight in the window of the living area, so it's heating the house on a cold day, and so it provides this heating cooling effect depending on the season. This is the same thing again down the western side of my house. Built a pergola. This used to be just a grass area and absolutely baking again in winter. This is the western side, so the western sun would beat on that wall. I put the tank up to block half of the wall and then this pergola to do the rest of it. And I've used the layers of the forest to try and put some other plants there. And now when you walk there in summer, it's quite a reasonable temperature and not such a bad place to be. All of these plants, by the way, when they're like that around your house, they're providing a windbreak as well to slow cold air in winter. So it's almost like in summer they provide this cooling effect, but in winter they're stopping freezing cold air hitting the house straight away. So that it's like a layer of insulation around the house. And again, this is the forest effect at the front of my place. A huge eucalypt tree on the western side of the house shades the house. And like I said before, that full sun, plants don't particularly like the full Australian sun, but the dappled shade of a eucalypt is perfect. And so this front garden just thrives underneath there. Like people say you can't grow things under eucalypt trees. Well, you can. Another great way of using green spaces to climate control your house is a green roof. Fantastic insulation and this transpiration effect where otherwise there would be heat coming from radiant tiles or reflective colour bond material or steel. The only downside to those is you need some serious engineering requirements to make sure the building underneath can support that weight. And most people are just thinking about the weight of the soil. But when that soil gets wet, if it's great soil, it's going to hold water and weigh 4 times as much. So there's some serious engineering needs to go into the building to make that a reality. Okay, we talked a little bit before about landscaping in heavy rain and trying to direct water flow around your house so it doesn't come through it. You can use things called swales, French drains, and spoon drains to do this. And this first example in the photos is my swales in the back garden. Water used to come from my driveway. I've got quite a large driveway, where we park the cars. Obviously, it all sheet off that, it's just solid concrete. It would all come down this straight past the house, down the path, down this ramp onto the back lawn, pond at the end of the back lawn, and there's a cliff on the right-hand side here, and houses below. And they would get absolutely hammered in wet weather. I don't know how they really went on in the wet weather. And so I knew I needed to do something about that. And I wanted to use the water and, thought that's a massive amount of water that I could be using to hydrate my landscape and get things to grow a lot easier. So I've marked the contours out on the lawn with these bricks and sticks. And I used, surveyor's spray paint to bright orange or pink spray paint to mark them out. And then I've dug trenches along the contours as near as possible. And so I measured out how big I wanted a path to be and how big I wanted the garden bed to be, and did paths and garden beds, accordingly, following the contours as closely as I could. And so essentially a swale is this ditch. When the water comes down, you see another level spreader there at the top. All that driveway water now goes into a drain on my driveway. I've put a grid there and it gets piped so that I can control where it goes instead of it just flowing anywhere at once. And it comes down this level spreader and it waters evenly across that whole end of the garden. It fills up the first swale once it's raining hard enough. The water overflows into the second swale, overflows into the third, fourth, and so on. And, it's got to work really hard and a lot of rain has to fall to get to the end of the garden now. The paths, I'll just click the slide. I fill up with wood chip. And so, yeah, the wood chip's nice and porous. It just soaks up the water and stays moist. And I planted fruit trees in the garden beds. So this is perfect conditions for fruit trees. You want fruit trees to be on some kind of a mound so that their surface roots are always dry, but the deeper tap roots can always get to water. And the fact that that wood chip is always moist means there's always water somewhere around there. And so, yeah, the garden's thriving now. And the picture at the bottom shows roughly what it looks like on a good day these days. And yeah, this picture shows the level spreader really well in action. So it's raining heavily. It's great going out on a rainy day and just watching what happens to the water as it flows through your place, especially if you've made, champagne towers like this and you want to see if they work. But you can see the holes there, all on the level, all pouring at the same time. The top bed here, I didn't put fruit trees in because the driveway could have oil on it or detritus from roads, just the general car muck. And so I put natives in there. And so that acts as a kind of biofilter before it reaches the swale, which is now full. I've only ever seen the first one fill up like a bath like this. The second one I've never seen get to this point. So it's obviously doing a decent job. So the water gets slightly filtered before it reaches this point. And then these are examples of French drains and spoon drains. The French drain is excellent for redirecting water. If you've got water flowing across a lawn, for example, towards your house, you can put a French drain in just in front of the house and the water will dribble through the gravel and follow the path of that drain wherever it goes. You can put a pipe in that can be, if it's a solid pipe, generally you're getting water from somewhere else and directing it to another part of the property or off the property. But if you put a slotted pipe in there, water that flows into that drain always has a really big space in the middle of the drain. It flows through preferentially to flow in where you don't want it to go. So yeah, you put the drain to flow where you want it to, and it will always follow that path of least resistance. So to make one, you just dig in a trench, much like those swales I just showed you in that picture. It only has to be really a shovel width, and about 300 mil deep. Line the bottom of the trench with some kind of landscaping cloth so that roots can't just grow in there straight off. They've got to work a bit harder to get through that. Fill the bottom of the hole with about maybe 5 centimeters of gravel. Put your pipe in and then fill the hole with gravel. And ideally wrap this landscaping cloth over the top of everything. So you've got gravel. The pipe should be sitting wholly within gravel, and then the landscaping cloth over the top of all that. And you can even put lawn over the top of that now. It depends what you're using your drain for, but some people use them as the paths. You can just have a gravel path as the drain. You can put lawn over the top of it. If you put a garden bed over it, you're asking for roots to get in there and block it up eventually. And I should say all of this, everything silts up eventually, but it takes years, like probably 10 years for it to get to the point where it really won't work anymore and you have to do something about it. But they're just very easy to do solutions to get water away from going through your house. A spoon drain is just a depression, like you're making a little stream to direct the water somewhere else on your property. You can fill the stream with rocks and use it as the path again, or put pavers in it so that it more easily sheets off and follows that direction. But yes, you put if you know where the contours are, you can put the spoon drain slightly off of contour so that it follows the hill and moves around your property. And very easy to make. There are other products available that are designed to let water soak into the landscape rather than run off. So lawn, for example, is a good example of that. Just putting garden beds everywhere. instead of concrete, gravel, paving, fake grass. These all they always remind me of the 70s, but I've realized now what a great idea they are. The old school sort of grass growing through the concrete honeycomb on the driveway. So it looks like grass, but you can still drive over it without your car sinking into wet grass. And believe it or not, you can get permeable asphalt and concrete these days. So I can't imagine how they'd go in a heavy downpour, but at least for light downpours or light rain, the water's going into the landscape in some way. Other nifty water utilization savings are using wicking beds to grow. You can grow anything in them. You can grow ornamentals, fruit and veggies, or even trees. They're essentially, the water occupies the bottom half of the bed and the soil the top half. And so you can use homemade ones or buy them off the shelf from companies. There's some resources at the end with company names that you can research for off the shelf ones. So I just bought another IBC, cut it in half, and I got 2 garden beds. In the bottom half, I put pot plants full of sand and put mesh over the top as a sort of support for the soil. You put landscaping cloth over the top of that and then fill it with soil and fill it with plants. The wicking effect, a really crude example of the wicking effect is if you drop a piece of toilet paper in the toilet and it sticks to the side and the one end of the toilet paper goes in the water at the bottom, eventually the water wicks up that whole piece of toilet paper. And that's essentially what's happening here. So the sand provides that wicking effect. And then when it goes through the sand and hits the soil, the plant roots are acting like, well, the plants are acting like a bit of a pump. The roots are dragging water in and it's transpiring out of the leaves. So it's having this, sort of pumping the water upwards from beneath. Oh, sorry, drawing the water upwards from beneath, just like that toilet paper. And so you don't have to water from the top. The plants are getting all the water they need rather than you just guessing what they need from the top. And there is no evaporation because all the water is beneath the soil and the sun is not getting at it. So these are fantastic again for time-poor gardeners. If you do it right, you probably only need to fill them once a month in really dry weather. So you can literally go on holiday for a month and your plants will still be growing. And this is a commercial version from Water Ups. You can buy the surround. You get a little reservoir that just unfolds like a box. And then they've got these nifty platforms that clip together. They're sort of a platform on legs. And so those little squares are hollow legs. And you fill them with perlite, as you can see in the second example. And you can clip these modules together to go as big and weirdly shaped as you want. The perlite does the same job as the sand in the previous example, wicks the water up, and you line it with landscaping cloth and then fill it up with soil. And so, yeah, you're getting that wicking effect again. The pipe in the middle is so you can see whether it's full. You can use it as a dipstick, just push a stick down in there and pull it back out and see where the water is. And that's a good point to put the hose in and fill the reservoir up. Another great solution that I've never had the good fortune to have to build one, but councils are starting to do this a lot these days to deal with really large volumes of water that collect in various places. Rain gardens. So these effectively act like a massive French drain. Big volumes of water coming out the gutters. Put large rocks and dense vegetation on the top so it doesn't erode when it comes out of the gutter. But the garden bed itself is made of extremely porous, so basically just sand and gravel. The water flows almost straight through it. If you're expecting enormous flows of water, you can put a pipe like the French drain to direct really heavy flows somewhere else, so that the whole rain garden doesn't overflow at the top and fill up like a bath. The plants that go in there's loads of plants, Australian natives in particular, that like grasses that can deal with a massive heavy downpour and being sort of submerged even for a while, and then it can last for months afterwards with no water. And this photo is a great picture of one in action. So the water's flowing in there at the bottom left quite heavily. You can see the water just piling out the end of that pipe. Massive rocks to stop it, that channel eroding. So the water can just percolate through all these rocks into the rain garden, which is full up. Smaller downpours will just, sink into that and seep out and not really cause any havoc. But you can see, again, like the tank, what goes in, once it's full up, what goes in must come out. And so there's an outflow at the other end with the same rocks there because the same volume of water is going to flow out of it with the same violence and force. So it's preventing that from eroding, and it goes onto the street and down the stormwater system. But not every downpour will make it to the street. Most of it will soak in and hydrate the whole landscape through this rain garden. And lastly, another great solution, another level spreader, but a totally different version of it. Just a trough on the horizontal full of rocks, and the water comes in, fills up the trough, all overflows at the same time and waters the whole garden bed all at once, which is great. I love that picture. So I'll have a little chat about Firewise gardens. This is, again, really critical to the shape of your landscape and where you are. It really influences the type of fire hazard you have. So if you're on the edge of a cliff, I'm on the edge of cliffs here, fire behaves completely differently going up a cliff than it does on the valley floor. And so you need to be really aware of that and get some advice on, just what kind of threat you have if you need to make a fire retardant garden. When you're making that garden, you can use fire retardant plants. And I don't want to put you under any false pretenses. There is no such thing as a plant that will never burn, but there are plants that burn or make it a lot more difficult for the fire to set alight to than others. Deciduous trees are a great example. They've got a lot of water in the wood, and so that water has to kind of evaporate and transpire out of the wood before it'll burn. If you think about putting a green log on the fire and you watch the sap come out of it before the log burns, that's essentially what's going to happen. So it's going to take a lot longer to burn than a beautiful old dry, seasoned piece of firewood. You can space plants out like this garden to reduce ember attack. So if one plant is actually burning, the embers from that plant are less likely to just pass over to the plant next door if you've got a bit of space there. You can use non-flammable materials such as recycled brick and stone to prevent anything. If you had wood chip down in a very dry area, the wood chip's going to burn. I've got to say, in my sort of climate, we've got a moderate bushfire risk, but it rains quite a bit too. So the wood chip is always really damp, and so it'd be really hard for that to burn easily. And then when we're talking about the tanks, this all-important maintenance, clearing the leaf litter and the drop branches, clearing the gutters. And if you followed all the little tips and tricks we've discussed so far, your land's with great soil and mulch, your land's going to be really well hydrated. And so you're going to have plants that are a lot healthier, a lot more full of water in the first place, and a lot harder to burn. And so keeping that landscape hydrated is a great move. And the last slide, this is a picture from the ABC when the fires went through in 2019 it's from Victoria. And the mulberry tree is credited with saving that house. And so you can see that they've done the right things by having a big cleared area around the house so the forest doesn't come up straight up to the front door in an attempt to, mitigate the fire risk. But everything else is burned apart from that mulberry tree and apart from the house. And so they've surmised that the mulberry tree, which is a deciduous tree, was taking ages to burn and transpiring like mad, and created a little microclimate around the house, and nothing burnt there. You can get lists on the resources list, which is this slide. You can get lists of plants that don't burn so easily. And so you can see there in the middle at the bottom, a list of fire retardant plants. And that's a Victorian organization that's made that. So guys have spent ages in the bush researching that. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. That was so interesting. Hopefully everyone got a heap out of it. I know I did. I was just having a quick look in the Q&A section and I can't see any particular questions. So if anyone has a question, feel free to pop it in the chat now. But yeah, I just wanted to say thanks. And I actually had a couple of questions for you as well. Like in Bayside, obviously, we've got a lot of semi-detached houses now, so we don't have a lot of space, not a lot of backyard or front yard. So what do you think our priorities should be when we're looking at sort of mitigating flood issues or choosing like water tanks? Like obviously we've got quite limited space. So any like tips for like smaller houses, like what should people look at first?
Yeah, well, the first thing you need to do is sort out the drainage and the pipes under the ground. I mean, especially if you're building somewhere, if you're lucky enough to have a blank slate before you start, making sure the pipes are in the right place, because digging them up or trying to dig something up that's been built afterwards is an absolute nightmare. And if you're paying a plumber to do that, you will be up for a hefty bill. So yes, getting your pipes in the right place to start with is absolutely critical. And then yes, like I was saying there, the tanks are all shapes and sizes these days. They fit just about anywhere. Like the stainless ones I got, plastic ones tend to be off the shelf, like they make it a certain size and you've got to try and shoehorn it in where you can. But with the stainless ones I got, when I inquired about them, they actually came out and measured everything and made them absolutely to fit my place. So
oh, yeah, okay. So really customized for your space.
yes.
Yeah.
And I was after the maximum amount of water I could fit in that space. So they made it as small as they could get away with and as wide as they could get away with.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. And then I guess my only other question was we like our north facing yard, like the sun beats right onto our front brick wall and we struggle to grow plants because everything kind of grows away from the brick wall. So we really struggle to do that sort of concertina effect up the house for that cooling. What would, like, other than obviously we use indigenous planting, but is there any other plants that you could recommend for like a really hot spot in your front, like where you're really, the suns are really beating down and it just moves away from the house? So I end up with everything planted kind of just moving away from the house. It's funny.
Yeah, the things I'm thinking about are succulents, but I'm struggling to think of something that'll grow like up
like
high.
right next to the brick, like it just won't grow.
I mean, things like a passion fruit should deal with it quite well.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
But they're evergreen, so it'll be a permanent green cover up the wall. But they love the full sun.
Yeah, okay. Good
tips. If you're looking at more tropical, like you've got microclimates. I mean, Victoria's climate is colder than where I am. But you're still getting microclimates where you can get away with certain things. When the houses are close together, the heat effect off all the houses make the overall environment a bit warmer than sort of just out in the open. And so, you can get away and try and experiment with certain things and look a bit more up to Queensland for inspiration on what kind of plants to grow.
Yeah, no, good one. I love it. All right, well, I don't think there's any questions. People are saying thank you, so that's really great, and I really appreciate your time, and it was an amazing presentation. And yes, if anyone's still on, just a reminder that we will send you the recording. So if you forgot to write something down or you wanted to know a little bit more about something, you'll be able to rewatch it again and learn something new as well. And we've got some great resources tagged in the chat here as well, and obviously listed on the presentation too. So thank you so much. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries.